Hello everyone, welcome to Game Easy Roll Good. Now, can we talk about this? There's something changing in the 2024 rules for Dungeons and Dragons that are changing the way that dual wielding works. There's been some discussion around online. Apparently, I haven't seen it myself, but I also haven't sought it out. But let's look at the 2014 rules real quick to kind of get a sense of where we were, and then we'll see about where we're going. So in the 2014 handbook, there was this blurb in the combat section that says, two weapon fighting, when you take the attack action and attack with a light melee weapon that you're holding in one hand, you can use a bonus action attack with a different light melee weapon that you're holding in the other hand. And then you don't add your ability modifier to the damage of that bonus attack. And if it has a thrown property, you can throw it. I think that was always true, it's just a clarification. But that is, again, that is changing in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and we saw this as early as the playtests, but let's look at where that rule has moved to. So now it's part of the light weapon property. This whole blurb about two weapon fighting doesn't exist anymore. The light weapon property instead says, when you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. That extra attack must be made with a different light weapon. You don't add your ability modifier to the extra attack's damage unless it's negative. So it doesn't say anything about the thrown property, but it doesn't also stop you. I mean, again, that was just a clarification. The rules are mostly the same. However, there's one big difference, and if you read the title of the video, then of course you know what that is. It no longer says that you're holding in the other hand. So it's called two-weapon fighting. I mean, technically it's called the light property now. But you're not required to be holding two weapons. You need two different weapons to do it, but you don't need to be holding them in either hand. That's the easiest way to do it, but it's not the only way to do it, which is pretty interesting. So there's a bunch of different rules that surround this new way of quote-unquote two-weapon fighting around the light weapon property. One of which is the Nick Mastery, which is available to any class that has access to weapon masteries, or if you take the weapon mastery feat. The Nick Mastery says when you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of the bonus action. You can only make this once per turn, so you can't action surge and get two Nick attacks. You just get the one every turn. So it just moves that bonus action from the light weapon property to your action, which is pretty cool. But again, it doesn't say anything about that weapon, that attack needing to be made with a weapon from your other hand. Interesting. Secondly, or thirdly, I guess, there is the dual wielding feat. Now, the dual wielding feat literally says dual wielding. Again, we think, of course, dual wielding in two hands, but there is more to the dual wielder feat, but this is the main part that we're going to focus on right now. In 2024, the dual wielding feat says, when you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a weapon that has the light property, you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon, which must be a melee weapon that lacks the two-handed property. Again, you don't add your ability modifier to the damage unless it's negative. So here, again, we're not saying, it needs to be held in your other hand. And actually this time, it doesn't need to even be a light weapon. So the bonus action attack you get from dual wielder doesn't need to be a light weapon. It can be a quarterstaff, it can be a trident, longsword, it can be whatever you want it to be. So finally, there's one more rule regarding two-weapon fighting that we can look at, and that's the actual two-weapon fighting style. And again, it's called two-weapon fighting, and technically you are using two or more weapons. And it says when you make an extra attack as a result of using a weapon that has the light property, you can add your ability modifier to the damage of that attack if you aren't already adding it to the damage. So for the Nick attack and for the dual wielder attack, you can now add your ability score. But again, it doesn't say anything about the attack that you make with a light weapon or as part of the light property in your other hand or anything. It doesn't say in your other hand at all, right? So we can do this one-handed, which means that we can now essentially quote-unquote dual wield while we're holding a shield. We can do it while we're keeping one hand open if we want to grapple people or push them or do whatever we want to do. Let's take a quick look at how this evolved over the playtest, right? So we saw this as early as playtest 2. It just released the light weapon property. It says when you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon in one hand, you can make one extra attack as part of the same action. So the Nick mastery wasn't around during the playtest 2. Then it continues, that extra attack must be made with a different light weapon in the other hand, and you don't add your ability modifier to the damage, blah, 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 blah. So this looks very similar to the 2014 rules, except that now that extra attack is part of the action because we don't have the Nick mastery yet. Following playtest 2, we don't see the light weapon mastery again until playtest 4. This was the Druid and Paladin playtest, so now it changes. It still says as part of the same action, because again, the Nick mastery hasn't been released yet, or even maybe created yet. But the text saying "in the other hand" has been removed. And I know I personally, provided the feedback saying, hey, you removed the part about it being in the other hand. Was that intentional? Because now we can do this one-handed. And then in playtest 5, we look at playtest 5. Now it says you can do that extra attack as a bonus action. So that was sort of, nerfed. And then this was the weapons playtest. So this is where the Nick mastery came in. So you need a light weapon with the Nick mastery, and then you can make attack as a bonus action to quote unquote dual wield. But it still doesn't say it needs to be in your other hand. Now, we wouldn't expect them to make changes from one playtest to the next. Usually there's, 2 playtests between changes from features or classes or anything like that. But then again, in playtest 6, the final playtest for the player's handbook, we see that it's the exact same as it was in playtest 5. This was unchanged. That doesn't mean it's intentional. There were things that were like in early playtests, like playtest 2, that made it into the player's handbook as is, and they might be broken and might need changing still. But I think it's interesting that they made this change, and I think it feels intentional to me. It feels like it's the way that they want it to be. It is a little weird that it's quote unquote dual wielding, and there's things called 2-weapon fighting, but it doesn't require you to be holding 2 weapons in your hand. But I don't think it's broken. I think it just gives marshals a lot more options in combat, because you can be dual wielding in one combat, and then the next combat you can be like, man, I think I need more defense here. This is a very difficult fight, so I'm going to equip a shield this time. And that works out pretty well. Like you can dual wield if you want to. You can sword and board if you want to. I want to be able to grapple people and pull them around. You can do that too, while not sacrificing attacks or sacrificing defense, however you want to play it, really. 2024 is being very, very friendly to marshals. So again, I think this is intentional. I kind of don't want to see them change it if and when they release any errata. So let's talk about free actions, because this is what really unlocks the potential of the new dual wielding in 2024. So in 2014, we had this sort of free action rules. It says you can also interact with one object or feature of the environment for free during either your move or during your action. For example, you could open the door during your move as you stride toward a foe, or you could draw your weapon as part of the same action you use to attack. But if you wanted to interact with a second object, you need to use your action. This was the object interaction or use an object action that was in the player's handbook. And on that same page in the player's handbook, there was a table that says, here are some examples. And the first one is draw or sheath a sword. And then further down, you can see pick up a dropped axe. So if you wanted to, you can do this once for free, but if you wanted to do it again, you would need to use a whole action. So you need to action surge and draw a second weapon, which is, you're not going to do that. That's just a waste of an action surge, of course. So it's kind of restrictive on how well you could dual wield, but this is changing in 2024. And if you look in the rules glossary under the attack action, it says equipping and unequipping weapons. You can either equip or unequip one weapon when you make an attack as part of this attack or as part of this action. You do so either before or after the attack. If you equip a weapon before the attack, you don't need to use it for that attack. So I can draw a weapon and attack with a different one that's in my other hand if I'm actually dual wielding, right? Equipping a weapon includes drawing it from a sheath or picking it up. Unequipping a weapon includes sheathing it, stowing it, or dropping it. And that was sort of a nice inclusion, because I think a lot of us kind of, cheated the system that way. Or like, well, I can drop this for free, right? That's effortless for me to drop this weapon. But now they're explicitly including that as one of the things that we can do to as part of the drawing and stowing weapons or equipping and unequipping weapons. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about this. So if we look at the actual dual wielder feat, here it is in all of its glory. It requires level 4. it requires a strength or dexterity of 13. I think, you know, dexterity 13 plus, pretty much everyone should have that. If you don't have a dexterity above 13, you're probably wearing heavy armor, which means your strength is probably above 13. So anyone who's going to be taking the dual wielder feat probably meets these prerequisites pretty easy. It grants an ability score increase to either your strength or dexterity +1 up to a maximum of 20. It gives you the enhanced dual wielding feature, which we talked about before. But it also gives this quick draw feature, which again, I think this was in the player's handbook in 2014, where he says you can draw or stow 2 weapons that lack the two-handed property when you would normally be able to draw or stow only 1. So in 2014, this meant that at the start of our turn, if we didn't have any weapons in hand, we could draw them both, whereas without the dual wielder feat, we could only draw 1 and would have to wait until the whole next turn to draw our other one and actually dual wield. But now, with the changes to the equipped and unequipping weapons, we can do this every time we make an attack as part of our attack action. It does mention that we have to do so either before or after the attack. And the way that I would interpret this is that you have to do both, either before or after the attack. Like you have to draw 2 weapons and then attack, or attack and then stow a weapon and draw a weapon, or attack and stow 2 weapons. But you can't, for example, again, the way I'm reading it, you know, draw a weapon, attack with it, stow with it. You have to make that decision either before or after the attack, what you're going to do with both opportunities. It also says you don't need to use it for that attack. If I attack with 1 weapon, I can draw another, and I don't, as part of that attack action, and I don't need to automatically attack with this other one that's in my other hand. There's another thing here in the dual wielder feat that says, and again, just to remind that this weapon that we make with the bonus action attack doesn't need to be a light weapon. It just needs to not have the two-handed property. So again, quarterstaves, battle axes, longswords, etc. So we can mix and match the weapons that we're using, and this gets really good once we have the extra attack feature, plus the fact that our Nick attack, we get that free attack from the Nick mastery. That makes us basically have 3 attacks per attack action while working this way. So we can again, we'll get into it pretty soon here. Let's move on. Yeah, we're going to get into the attack flow here. So this is an example. We're going to start at levels 1 to 3, very early on, very limited options that we have. So we have some rules and goals that we're trying to do. And again, we're thinking that we're just doing this one-handed. Let's pretend we have a shield in our other hand. We can only work with our free hand. Our rules that we need to follow and the goals we're trying to achieve are: 1, we can only swap weapons once per attack and during the attack action, twice if we have the dual wielder feat, which at level 1 to 3 we do not. Number 2, one of our attacks must use the Nick mastery. At levels 1 to 3, we only have 1 attack per attack action. So we need to have a Nick weapon in hand when we're doing that. And number 3, we want to end the attack action with our Nick mastery weapon in hand if we don't have dual wielder. And I think this is slightly less important once we have extra attack. You'll see about that later. Well, let's talk about levels 1 to 3. We have no feat, no dual wielder feat, no extra attack. We're going to take our attack action. We want to start this attack action with a weapon that has the Nick property. We're going to call it Nick Weapon 1 in hand. We're going to make our attack. We're going to attack with Nick Weapon 1. And then as part of that attack action, we're going to stow it. And then we're going to... making that attack triggers the Nick property. And then we're going to make that extra attack from the Nick mastery. We're going to first draw a second weapon, a different weapon that has the Nick mastery, and attack with that one as well. Now, again, why do we attack with a second weapon that has the Nick mastery? Well, because we need to, again, the following round, we need to make our one attack that we have with a weapon that has the Nick mastery to, again, trigger that second attack. So level 1, it's like we have extra attack, but we just need to work around this Nick mastery to do it. So if we move on to level 4, now we have the dual wielder feat. So now we can draw or stow 2 weapons per attack as part of the attack action, but we don't have extra attack yet. We're still making 1 actual attack, not including the one from the Nick mastery. But this is what it looks like, right? We say, I'm going to take the attack action. We still want to start with a weapon that has the Nick mastery in hand. We're going to make our one and only actual attack from the attack action with that Nick weapon. We're going to stow it, we're going to draw any other light weapon, and doesn't matter which mastery it has. And then that triggers the Nick mastery. And then we'll make our second attack from the Nick mastery with that light weapon. We will stow it and then redraw our weapon that has the Nick mastery. And again, we're doing this all one-handed. We have a shield in our other hand, and we're keeping our other hand open because we want to grab onto someone or whatever we want to do. And then bonus action, because again, we have the dual wielder feat. We attack with the weapon that has the Nick mastery, and then we're just going to repeat this every round, assuming we don't want to do something else. But now we go move on to level 5 when this gets really, really crazy, because now we have the dual wielder feat, and now we have extra attack. And the fact that we just have an extra attack, that's 3 attacks per attack action, 1 regular attack, 1 extra attack, and 1 Nick mastery attack, we can really start juggling different weapons. So we're going to take our attack action. Now we want to start with a non-two-handed weapon in hand. It doesn't need to be the one with the Nick mastery, and for this purpose, we're going to say it's not. Let's say we have a battle axe, which has the topple mastery, so we can knock someone prone. So we begin with a battle axe in hand. We make our first attack with this battle axe, and then we're going to stow it and draw our Nick weapon. And again, this is all part of that 1 attack action. So we attack with the axe, stow it, and then draw our Nick weapon, which might be a scimitar. We use our extra attack to attack with the Nick weapon. And as part of that attack, we're going to stow that weapon and then draw a different light weapon, which can have any mastery, doesn't need to be Nick. Which that attack will trigger the Nick mastery. And then finally, we will make the extra Nick attack with the other light weapon. We're going to stow it and then redraw a non-two-handed weapon. It can be the same one from the start of the turn, or it can be a different one if you wanted to switch to a different mastery. And then we're going to bonus action, again from the dual wielder feat, attack with the non-two-handed weapon. And then we're just going to repeat this every round. So we have 2 attacks with the weapon that could be a D8. We have 2 attacks with weapons that need to be light, so they're probably going to be a D6 or a D4, depending on what you're using. But, you know, some classes like Fighter or like the Pact of the Blade Warlock at level 12+, they get up to 3 attacks per attack action, not including the Nick mastery attack, so that would be 4 attacks at that time. Excuse me. The Pact of the Blade Warlock doesn't get mastery, so you'll need to multi-class to get the Nick mastery enabled. But still, that's something that they can do. And so I want to note here that for every extra attack beyond the first one at level 5, this will be, you know, again, level 11 plus fighters or level 12 plus Pact of the Blade Warlocks if you take the Devouring Blade invocation. This will allow you to switch to another weapon, including heavy weapons, now that we have a 3rd extra attack, as long as you end the attack action with the non-two-handed or the Nick weapon in hand, so we can make it as part of our bonus action attack from dual wielder, right? So, for example, let's say we have 3 attacks as part of our attack action plus the Nick mastery. I can, let's say I have a battle axe, attack with that, stow it, draw a maul, attack with the maul, stow it, draw a Nick mastery weapon, attack with it, stow it, draw my other light weapon, attack with it, stow it, draw my battle axe again, bonus action attack with that. That's 5 attacks, including a heavy weapon. So I can use graze or cleave or whatever I want to use. You have a lot of different options, or you can just mix and match your weapons to get different masteries included on your attack. So that's really, really interesting. And you can do this all while holding a shield. Of course, you can't use a heavy or 2-handed weapon while holding a shield, but if you have one hand free, you're still going to end your turn with one hand free. So it doesn't matter that you used a 2-handed weapon at some point during the combat. Even for weapons that are versatile, like the battle axe or the quarter staff, you know, if you have one hand free and you only draw that weapon, you're still benefiting from all these dual wielding, quote unquote, dual wielding features, but you can use the versatile property while it's out, stow it and redraw a new weapon, right? You don't need to be using it in one hand to benefit from these features, or you don't need to be using it in 2 hands to benefit from all these features. So I think that's really interesting. I think it benefits martials a lot. And it might seem overpowered just kind of reading it like, man, this doesn't really make sense because it's not really dual wielding. But I think if you play with it and you realize the way it allows you to switch things up as a martial character and kind of change your style from one combat to the next, I think people are probably going to like it. It's only going to get crazy if you add a lot of damage riders onto all the attacks that you're making. You know, conjure minor elementals is kind of the new hotness in terms of what's actually freaking broken. So imagine making, you know, 5 attacks per turn easy, and then you're adding all these 2d8s from conjure minor elementals if you're have some kind of crazy multi-class build to take advantage of that. But generally, I think this will be fine, and it's going to compete very well with Great Weapon Master, especially if you have a lot of damage riders. I think whether or not which one will be better will depend on just what class you have and how many attacks you're making, and you know, what kind of damage you can add onto things. But it's pretty close. I've kind of done some napkin math. I'm not going to do it right now, but it's pretty close. And you know, dual wielding was kind of a joke as long as you were using feats for the longest time in 2014, because Great Weapon Master was just so broken. As long as you had advantage, it kind of made up for the -5 plus 10 to hit. Now, Great Weapon Master is arguably even better. It doesn't do as much damage, but you're not penalized on your hit. But dual wielding, like, they have these buffs now, and they can do very competitive damage, and they have the advantage of, again, using a shield, unlike someone who is using a two-handed weapon, right? So let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if this gives you any ideas for characters that you think would be pretty exciting. You know, I have at least one person in my play group who would love playing this sort of like weapon master, master of all weapons sort of thing that they can do. This is a character fantasy that people can actually really fulfill now in a very fulfilling way. So let me know what you think in the comments, and I hope to see you on my next video. Thank you.